There is a new leader of the world's 1.4 billion Roman Catholics, and he is a stunning choice. For the first time in history, the Pope is American. The crowd roared for more than 2 minutes before the new Pope began to speak. He is 69-year-old Robert Francis Prevost from Chicago. For his papacy, he has taken the name Pope Leo XIV.
What if I told you that the most powerful man in the Catholic Church right now wasn't even expected to become Pope? What if I told you that the person now sitting in the Vatican is not only rewriting church policies, but shaking the foundation of centuries-old traditions? This is not fiction. This is Pope Leo XIV, a name that didn't even make headlines until everything suddenly changed.
The first U.S.-born Pope to lead the Catholic Church was officially installed as the Bishop of Rome over the weekend. He declared himself a Roman. Pope Leo XIV is also a Chicagoan, and his leadership is expected to strengthen ties between the Church and its American followers.
Who really is Pope Leo XIV? Why is he being called the People's Pope and the Silent Revolutionary? What secrets does his past hold? And most importantly, how is he changing the Church in ways no one dared before? The Catholic Church, known for its slow and cautious approach to change, now finds itself under the leadership of a man who isn't afraid to break the silence on controversial issues. His views on science, poverty, gender roles, and global politics have already started reshaping conversations that were once taboo in Vatican walls. People across the world are asking, is he a reformer or a disruptor? Is he following in the footsteps of Jesus or steering the Church towards something entirely new? Why are some cardinals celebrating him while others fear he's going too far? This story is not just about religion. It's about leadership, power, courage, and how one man might change the course of 1.3 billion believers forever. Stay with us as we break down who Pope Leo XIV really is and what makes his papacy different from every other pope before him. From silence to spotlight. Before Pope Leo XIV became the most talked about name in the religious world, he lived a life far from the spotlight. Born as Cardinal Matteo Bellini in a quiet town in northern Italy, he was known for his calm nature, sharp thinking, and unusual silence on public matters. He didn't chase media attention. He didn't publish books. And yet, behind the scenes,
there is a new chapter in the pontificate of Pope Leo XIV. EWTN is excited to announce its book on the first American Pope is available now for pre-order.
He was deeply respected by those who knew him. Unlike previous popes who served in big cities or diplomatic roles, Bellini spent years working among refugees, the homeless, and war victims. He stayed away from political debates and focused only on people, helping them directly. His hands-on work earned him the title of the Hidden Shepherd in church circles. But outside the Vatican, hardly anyone knew his name. So how did a quiet, low-profile cardinal suddenly become the leader of the world's largest Christian community? Some say it was a sign of change that the Church desperately needed. Others claim that his election was a surprise even to the cardinals who voted for him. A few even whispered that he was selected not because of what he had done, but because of what he might dare to do. Was he chosen to heal or to challenge? To comfort or to confront? According to one bishop who knew him closely, he has the mind of a philosopher, the heart of a saint, and the courage of a soldier. But most of all, he has nothing to lose, and that makes him dangerous in the best way possible. The election that shocked the world. When the conclave began to choose a new pope, nobody expected Cardinal Matteo Bellini to even be in the top 5 contenders. The names floating around were mostly politicians in robes, experienced, media-friendly, and well-connected. Bellini, on the other hand, was quiet, avoided interviews, and had no powerful allies in the Curia. But something unusual happened behind those closed Vatican doors. On the second day of voting, Bellini's name kept appearing. Cardinals who had never spoken to him before started talking about his honesty, his work among the poor, and his lack of personal ambition. One cardinal reportedly said, We don't need a manager. We need a man with a soul. And then, without any clear campaign or public support, the votes tipped in his favor. The world waited for the announcement. When his name was declared, many journalists were confused. Who was this Bellini? Why him? Social media exploded. Some praised it as a bold move. Others called it a mistake. Even church insiders were unsure. But what followed was even more surprising. As he stepped out onto the balcony, he refused the grand vestments that popes usually wear during their first appearance. Instead, he wore a simple white robe and looked directly into the crowd. He didn't speak much. Just one line. "I am not here to rule. I am here to serve." That line made headlines across the globe. Pope Leo XIV had arrived, and everything was about to change. Pope Leo XIV wasted no time. Within weeks of becoming pope,
There's a new pope, and his name is Cardinal Robert Francis Prevost, now Pope Leo XIV.
he began making decisions that left many senior figures in the Vatican uneasy. The centuries-old rules that had defined the Church's daily operations were suddenly being reviewed, and in some cases, removed. One of his first acts was eliminating the luxurious papal apartment. Instead, he chose to live in a small guest house inside the Vatican, where he ate in the common dining hall and greeted cleaners and gardeners by name. This simple act sent a clear message. He was not above anyone. He also ordered a financial audit of the Vatican Bank, a place many believed was untouchable. Corruption cases were quietly handled for years, but Leo XIV made them public. Several officials were dismissed, and stricter transparency rules were introduced. One Vatican insider said, "He didn't just shake the table, he turned it upside down." Then came the liturgical changes. He encouraged local priests to use regional languages more often instead of Latin. He spoke openly about including lay people, especially women, in major church decisions. He even reduced the strict dress codes for visitors in the Vatican. Some cardinals were furious. "Tradition is not the enemy," one said. But Leo XIV responded calmly, "Tradition should guide us, not chain us." Was he disrespecting the past? Or finally setting the Church free from rituals that no longer served its people? One thing was clear. The Church was no longer moving slowly. It was marching forward. His stand on poverty and wealth. While previous popes spoke about poverty in moral terms, Pope Leo XIV acted. He didn't just preach about helping the poor, he changed the way the Church dealt with wealth itself. One of his first public addresses shocked many religious institutions. He said, "The Church should not own what it does not need, while children starve in silence." This wasn't just a moral lesson, it was a warning. Shortly after, he ordered a full inventory of church-owned luxury properties worldwide, including vacation estates, investment lands, and priceless artworks hidden in private Vatican rooms. And then, in a move that no pope before him dared to make, he ordered the sale of several unused properties, redirecting the money to build shelters, hospitals, and food programs in Africa, Asia, and Latin America. Critics called it risky. Supporters called it revolutionary. In one case, the Church funded an entire refugee village in Syria, using the money gained from the sale of a centuries-old estate in France. The Pope said, "What good is history if it cannot help the present?" He also stopped receiving expensive gifts from world leaders. Instead, he asked them to donate to schools, clean water projects, or women's shelters.
In Pope Leo XIV's case, he also made a donation to the needy, but in the form of food. The department in charge of charitable works handled the distribution.
He reminded them that serving people is more sacred than statues and ceremonies. A cardinal once asked, "What if the Church loses its power?" Leo XIV smiled and said, "What power do we need if we already have the people's trust?" His bold views on science and faith. For centuries, the Catholic Church and science have had a complicated relationship. From Galileo to Darwin, New scientific discoveries were often seen as threats to faith. But Pope Leo XIV is rewriting that script, not by ignoring science, but by embracing it. In one of his early speeches at a climate summit, he said, "Faith without facts can mislead. Facts without faith can be dangerous. Together, they can heal." This line made headlines across the world. Leo XIV openly supports climate change research. He's the first pope to meet not only with theologians and priests, but also with physicists, biologists, and climate scientists. He created a Vatican committee specifically focused on scientific progress and invited Nobel Prize winners to guide it. He even challenged the Church's past silence on environmental harm, calling it a sin against future generations. He planted trees with school children in Brazil, visited flood victims in Bangladesh, and called out governments ignoring the climate crisis, including some from countries with strong Catholic populations. But his boldest move came when he approved a Vatican report supporting genetic research in medicine, including stem cell studies, long considered controversial in church circles. He clarified, "Science does not kill faith, but ignoring science can kill humanity." Some conservative bishops accused him of abandoning church traditions, but Leo XIV responded with clarity. God created nature. Understanding nature only brings us closer to understanding God. In a world where facts are questioned and truth is debated, Pope Leo XIV stands at the intersection, refusing to choose between science and spirituality. The gender question. One of the most controversial areas Pope Leo XIV has stepped into is the role of women in the Church. For centuries, the Catholic hierarchy has been strictly male-dominated. Women could serve, assist, and teach, but never lead. That might be changing under Pope Leo XIV. In his 4th month as Pope, he made headlines by appointing Sister Maria Consuelo as the head of a major Vatican department, something never done before. He called it a first step, not a final one. Many inside the Church were shocked. Some quietly objected. Others feared it would lead to a push for women priests. But Pope Leo didn't stop there. He created a council of women, including nuns, laywomen, doctors, and social workers, to advise him directly. This wasn't a symbolic move. The council had authority, budget power, and the Pope's full attention. In a public statement, he said, "The Church cannot speak for the people if it silences half of them." He also pushed local dioceses to allow women more teaching roles in seminaries and more influence in decision-making bodies. He began encouraging open discussions on female deacons, a debate long considered off-limits. Of course, there was backlash. Some cardinals warned that this could destabilize sacred structures, but Leo XIV answered them directly. If the structure cannot stand on equality, it was never sacred to begin with. The message was clear. Under Leo XIV, gender is no longer a hidden issue. It's on the table, and change is not just possible, it's already happening. Facing the scars. One of the darkest shadows over the Catholic Church has been the decades of abuse scandals involving priests.
We do have more tonight on the Catholic Church abuse scandal. A Pennsylvania grand jury says more than 300 priests abused more than 1,000 children and likely thousands more over 7 decades.
Many popes have spoken about it, but few have taken firm action. Pope Leo XIV, however, treated it like a war that had to be won, not with words, but with justice. Within his first year, he created a special tribunal, separate from church authorities, made up of international judges, lawyers, and survivors. This tribunal was given the power to investigate, prosecute, and publicly name priests involved in abuse cases. No more secrecy, no more quiet removals, no more quiet settlements. At one press conference, he said, "A church that hides pain is not holy, it is guilty." This broke a long tradition of internal handling of abuse cases. For the first time, Vatican documents were opened to independent investigators. Some bishops were removed. Others were forced to testify. A few high-ranking officials were arrested, even cardinals. He also met directly with survivors, not just behind closed doors, but on camera, in town halls, where victims could speak freely. He knelt before them and asked for forgiveness, not as a pope, but as a man. A survivor from Ireland said after meeting him, "He didn't cry, he listened, and then he promised action and delivered it." Pope Leo XIV made it clear, the Church's protection is for the innocent, not the powerful. In doing so, he didn't just seek to fix the Church, he tried to cleanse it. Perhaps no issue has divided modern Catholics more than the Church's position on LGBTQ+ people. For years, Church doctrine labeled same-sex relationships as sinful and restricted their participation in many church functions. But Pope Leo XIV stepped into this debate with a message that stunned both critics and supporters. In one of his Sunday homilies, broadcast worldwide, he said, "Who are we to deny God's love to anyone he has already embraced?" It wasn't just a kind sentence. It was a shift in tone, direction, and policy. He initiated the first Vatican conference on identity, inviting theologians, psychologists, and LGBTQ+ Catholics. The goal wasn't to debate doctrine, but to listen. Stories of pain, rejection, suicide, and broken families were shared openly, many for the first time inside Vatican walls. Later, the Pope encouraged priests to stop turning away LGBTQ+ members from sacraments like communion and confession. He instructed churches to use language that heals, not judges. And most controversially, he supported civil unions, not as a substitute for marriage, but as recognition of love and stability. When questioned by media, he replied, "The job of the Church is not to build fences, it is to open doors." Of course, this move drew fierce backlash. Protests erupted, petitions were signed. Some churches even refused to follow his guidance. But Leo XIV didn't back down. "If being kind is controversial," he said, "then let kindness be my legacy." Under Pope Leo XIV, the Church wasn't erasing the past. It was writing a new chapter, one of welcome, the global Church. For centuries, the Vatican's decisions and leadership were mostly shaped in Europe, by Europeans. But Pope Leo XIV saw a different reality. The Church was no longer a European institution. It was a global family, and it was time to act like one. In his first year alone, he visited Nigeria, the Philippines, Brazil, and India, before ever setting foot in France or Germany. During his speech in Lagos, he said, "The heart of the Church no longer beats in one continent. It beats in many, together." He increased the number of cardinals from Africa, Asia, and Latin America, giving real power to regions often ignored. He challenged European dioceses to share resources with struggling parishes in developing nations. Instead of centralizing decisions in Rome, he pushed for local bishops to have greater authority over cultural matters. He also spoke directly against racism within the Church, something few popes ever acknowledged. When a black priest in South Africa was denied a promotion because of his race, Leo XIV made it public and overruled the decision. He famously said, "There is no such thing as a mission church and a real church. There is only one church, and it looks like all of us." The Pope's approach shook traditional power structures. Some European bishops quietly pushed back, accusing him of decentralizing too much. But he didn't stop. By shifting power to where the people were, not just where history happened, Pope Leo XIV turned the Church into a truly global community. Technology and the soul. Pope Leo XIV didn't just change policies, he changed platforms. For a church that has often lagged behind in modern communication, his approach to technology was nothing short of revolutionary. From day one, he made it clear. If the people are on screens, then the Church must be there too. He launched a Vatican app within 3 months of his election.
The Vatican has launched an app called Click to Pray. Here's a look at some of the slides here. It lists what the Pope is currently praying for. Users can then click an icon to indicate that they have prayed with him.
Not just for news, but for live mass streaming, confession scheduling, and even interactive Q&A sessions where the Pope himself responded weekly. He was the first to host a global digital rosary event where over 70 million people joined from across continents. But he didn't stop at smartphones. He formed a Vatican task force to study the impact of artificial intelligence on human dignity. He invited tech CEOs, including heads of Google and Apple, to discuss ethical AI. Afterward, he released a formal church position paper titled "The Soul of the Machine," warning against data misuse, surveillance, and the loss of empathy in tech-driven societies. He also addressed cyberbullying, internet addiction, and misinformation, calling them spiritual viruses of the modern world. Technology should never replace love, but it can carry it farther than ever before, he once said in a virtual sermon that went viral in over 40 countries. Some traditionalists found his digital approach too casual, but younger Catholics felt heard for the first time. One teenager tweeted, "For the first time, the Pope is in my notifications, and it feels like he's talking to me." Under Leo XIV, the Church didn't fear the future. It logged in, wealth and the Vatican. One of the oldest criticisms against the Vatican has been its immense wealth. From priceless art to secret bank accounts, the Church has often faced questions about how it manages and hides its money. Pope Leo XIV did something rare. He opened the books. Shortly after becoming Pope, he ordered an independent financial audit of every Vatican department. The results were shocking: missing funds, luxury spending, and investments in unethical industries. Instead of burying the findings, he published them online. "A church that speaks of humility must first learn to live it," he said at a press conference. He sold off several luxury Vatican properties that had been sitting empty for decades and used the money to fund shelters in Syria and healthcare centers in Congo. He canceled contracts with private banks that lacked transparency and created a digital system so Catholics worldwide could track where donations were going. His boldest move? Releasing the personal salaries and benefits of all senior clergy, including his own. Many cardinals were uncomfortable. Some called it an invasion of sacred privacy. But Leo XIV insisted, trust is not built behind closed doors. He introduced a new rule. Any donation over $10,000 must be made public, including its purpose and source. He encouraged churches around the world to do the same, creating a culture of accountability from the top down. Critics warned this openness could invite political pressure or loss of traditional donors. But Pope Leo XIV believed something else. If money is powerful, let it be used to serve, not to rule. Women in the Church. For centuries, women have been the backbone of the Catholic Church, leading schools, running charities, serving communities, yet denied positions of real power. Pope Leo XIV knew this contradiction could no longer be ignored. Within his first year, he appointed Sister Elena Martinez as the first woman to lead a Vatican department, the Office of Social Outreach. It sent shockwaves through the church hierarchy, but that was only the beginning. He restructured church law to allow women to vote in the Synod, the highest advisory body of the church. For the first time in history, women religious had equal say in decisions that shaped global Catholic policy. In an open letter, he wrote, "The voice of a woman is not a whisper in the church. It is the sound of God's wisdom." He called out the contradiction of celebrating female saints while ignoring living women's potential. He created scholarships for female theologians, elevated women to serve on theological councils, and openly discussed the need to revisit the ban on female deacons, a debate once considered off-limits. This angered conservative bishops. Some accused him of endangering doctrine. But Leo XIV answered, Doctrine does not fear truth, it fears silence. In a world where women lead nations and run corporations, Leo XIV asked, "Why not the church too?" A young Catholic woman in Brazil said after his reforms, "For the first time, I see a church that sees me." Under Pope Leo XIV, inclusion wasn't symbolic. It was structural. It was change, real and irreversible. Many popes have spoken about peace, justice, and human dignity. But Pope Leo XIV took those words and turned them into visible actions, often faster than governments or aid organizations. When the war in Sudan broke out again, and refugees began pouring across the borders with nowhere to go, Leo XIV didn't just send prayers, he sent planes. The Vatican directly funded rescue flights, food drops, and medical care in coordination with the UN. He said bluntly, "If the church can afford gold ceilings, it can afford to save children." During the massive earthquake in Turkey, he ordered the Sistine Chapel to be temporarily closed, not for repairs, but so part of its ticket revenue could go toward building shelters. He visited the camps personally, walking barefoot through rubble with survivors. When forest fires choked the Amazon, he condemned global apathy in his most direct environmental message yet. God made the earth for life, not profit. Burning it is a form of murder. He created a Vatican climate task force that worked with scientists and indigenous leaders, and he redirected church investments away from oil companies toward green energy projects. Even during the migrant crisis in the Mediterranean, he shocked Europe by offering vacant Vatican apartments to displaced families. Over 200 were housed within months. Critics said he was turning the church into a political agency. His response was sharp. If feeding the hungry is politics, then so was Christ. Pope Leo XIV didn't wait for change. He delivered it, one act of compassion at a time. Pope Leo XIV didn't just lead the church, he redefined it. From climate action to women's empowerment, from digital outreach to confronting financial secrets, his reign was not marked by tradition, but by transformation. And yet, the real question isn't just about what he changed, it's about what comes next. He refused to be called His Holiness in private. He asked people to call him Brother Leo. He made confession more about healing than guilt, and sermons more about humanity than hierarchy. In his last global address, he said, "A church that only survives does not serve. If we are not changing lives, we are not following Christ." But what happens when a man like this steps down or passes away? Will the next pope carry forward this fire, or will the doors slowly close again? Will the cardinals who once opposed him now undo his reforms or protect them? Will the digital church he built remain open to the young or fade into quiet halls again? More importantly, will Catholics around the world demand more popes like Leo XIV? His legacy forces us to ask, should faith always bow to tradition, or should it lead change? Is the church still a mirror of old powers, or can it be a voice for the forgotten? And if one man could spark such a revolution, what could millions of believers do? Pope Leo XIV may have changed the church, but now the church must decide if it will change the world. So now you know who Pope Leo XIV is, not just by title, but by the fire he's lit inside the oldest institution on earth. He didn't wear the crown of comfort. He wore the weight of change. He didn't protect the silence of the past. He shattered it with truth, inclusion, and compassion. But the question isn't just what he did. The real question is, what will the church do now? Will his actions echo through the walls of cathedrals, or fade like sermons unheard? Will future popes walk his path, or quietly close the doors he opened? And more importantly, what would you do if you had the power to change a 1,000-year-old tradition? Would you speak up? Would you challenge power? Would you protect the poor over prestige? Because maybe, just maybe, it doesn't take a pope to change the church. It takes people who refuse to accept silence as faith. Let us know what you think. Should the Church embrace more leaders like Leo XIV? Or do you believe tradition should stay untouched? Your voice matters more than ever.